The biggest retirement mistake most people make is not what they think it is. It's not always earning too little. It's not even saving too little. And it's definitely not just failing to hit some giant magic number before you quit working. The real mistake is much quieter than that, which is exactly why it's so dangerous. Most people treat retirement like a scoreboard. They look at the balance in the 401k, check the IRA, maybe glance at a brokerage account, and if the total feels big enough, they relax. They assume the hard part is over. They think, I've got money, I'm probably fine. Probably fine is not a retirement strategy, because retirement is not just about building a pile of money, it's about knowing how that pile is supposed to support your life for decades without collapsing under bad timing, bad assumptions, inflation, taxes, or your own spending habits. In other words, this is not just a money target problem, it's a plan problem, and that distinction matters a lot. I talked to someone not long ago who was convinced he was in great shape. Mid-50s, solid income, responsible guy, had been contributing for years, had a decent-looking nest egg, and felt pretty confident about the whole thing. On paper, he looked like one of the prepared ones. But once we got past the surface, the confidence started falling apart fast. I asked him a few basic questions. How much do you think you'll actually spend each year in retirement? He wasn't sure. How much can you safely withdraw when the market drops? No idea. Which accounts will you draw from first? Hadn't thought about it. What happens if you retire right before a major downturn? Long pause. That's the problem. A lot of people think being on track means having money in the account, but having money and having a plan are not the same thing, not even close. You can spend 30 years doing a decent job saving and still walk into retirement with a dangerous blind spot if you've never tested how the whole thing is supposed to work once the paychecks stop. And that's where people get blindsided. Because the biggest retirement mistake usually doesn't feel like a mistake while you're making it. It feels like progress. It feels responsible. It feels reassuring. You see the balance growing and your brain tells you the problem is being handled. But if all you've built is a number without a system, then what you really have is hope dressed up as preparation. And hope gets real expensive when retirement lasts longer than you expected. Let's slow this down for a second, because this mistake is far more common than people think. A lot of smart, responsible people are making it right now without realizing it. The good news is this is fixable. You do not need a finance degree, a 40-page retirement plan, or a headache from complicated jargon to understand it. Once you see the problem clearly, it starts to make a lot more sense. So in this video, I'm going to break it down in a simple, practical way and show you exactly where people go wrong, why it matters, and how to think about it the right way. Here's the truth most people miss. Retirement has two completely different jobs. First, you build the money. Then, you make that money support you. And those are not the same skill. A lot of people spend decades focused on phase one: save more, invest more, grow the balance, watch the number go up, and assume that means safety is taking care of itself. It doesn't, because hitting a savings milestone is only half the job. The second half is knowing how to turn that pile of money into reliable income that can survive inflation, market drops, taxes, and a retirement that may last longer than expected. That's where people get caught. They obsess over accumulating wealth, but give almost no attention to how they'll actually use it once the paycheck disappears. And if you ignore that second phase, a big account balance can create a false sense of security fast.
Here's the biggest mistake in plain English. People think retirement ends when they hit the number. It doesn't. Retirement is not the finish line. It's the point where the real system has to start working, and the mistake is walking into that phase with no withdrawal plan at all. That's what it looks like in real life. No clear idea what retirement will actually cost, no plan for what to do when markets fall, no strategy for which account to tap first, no thought about taxes. No backup plan if retirement lasts much longer than expected. And that is more dangerous than it sounds. Someone can spend 30 or 40 years doing almost everything right. They save steadily, invest responsibly, stay out of bad debt, and still mess up retirement if they handle the income phase badly. because once the paychecks stop, small mistakes can do outsized damage, especially in the early years. That's why retirement has to be treated like a system, not a lump sum. That system has a few parts: how much you spend, how much you withdraw, how the market behaves, how inflation eats away at your buying power, how taxes reduce what you keep, how long retirement lasts, and how flexible you can be when things do not go perfectly. Ignore even one of those, and the whole plan gets weaker. Think of two retirees with exactly the same portfolio, same age, same amount saved, same starting point. One has a plan. They know their spending, withdraw carefully, adjust when markets get ugly, and think ahead. The other just starts pulling money whenever needed and assumes it will somehow work itself out. Same money, very different future. Because in retirement, the size of the account matters, but the strategy behind it matters just as much. Here's where this gets even more dangerous. The early years of retirement are fragile. If the market hits hard right after you retire, that damage hurts far more than a downturn later on. Why? Because you're not just waiting for recovery anymore. You're also pulling money out at the same time. That combination can weaken a portfolio fast. Same average returns over time, completely different outcome depending on when the bad years show up. That's why "I'll figure it out later" is such a risky mindset. Later might arrive in the middle of a crash. And most people miss this mistake for a very human reason. People love a clean target. A number feels solid, it feels measurable. Hit the number, problem solved. Financial content pushes this idea constantly, so people get trained to focus on balance size instead of income strategy. And emotionally, it is much easier to believe once I reach this amount, I'm done, than to deal with the messier question of how the money will actually work for the rest of your life. So the first fix is simple. Know what retirement will really cost. Not some fantasy number, not some giant round number pulled from the air. Real spending. Some expenses may drop, like commuting or payroll taxes. Others may rise, like healthcare, travel, or help around the house. If you do not know roughly what retirement will cost you each year, then every other calculation is built on fog. The second fix is to build a withdrawal framework. You need a basic rule for how much to take, when to take it, and how to adjust if conditions change. It does not need to be complicated. Start with a reasonable withdrawal rate, review it each year, and be willing to pull back a little when markets are rough. The point is not perfection. The point is not withdrawing blindly. The third fix is to plan for bad timing before bad timing shows up. Keep some cash on hand. Stay flexible with spending. Delay major optional expenses when markets are down. These are not advanced tricks. They're simple shock absorbers. They give your portfolio room to breathe when the sequence of returns is working against you. The fourth fix is to stop acting like retirement income comes from one place. It can come from Social Security, retirement accounts, taxable investments, and eventually required distributions. And the order you use those sources matters more than people realize. Taxes matter. Timing matters. A sloppy withdrawal order can quietly drain more money than necessary over time. And that brings us back to the big myth. Retirement is not solved the moment you hit a certain number. A person with a smaller portfolio and a clear, workable plan can easily be in a safer position than someone with more money and no strategy at all, because clarity beats guesswork every time. So the goal is not just to retire. The goal is to retire with a plan that can survive real life, bad markets, inflation, taxes, long lifespans, unexpected costs. Real retirement readiness is not just about how much you have, it's about how well your system holds up when life stops being neat. That's the real takeaway here. The biggest retirement mistake is not always failing to save enough. Sometimes it's doing all that saving, reaching retirement, and still having no real system for making the money last. And in the end, a simple plan you actually understand and follow will always beat a perfect plan that only exists in theory.